My wife said, "It's just a work trip with my work husband, don't be so insecure." I just nodded. When she came back, the house was empty. Then her boss called, voice shaking, "He didn't just divorce you. Emily, please tell me you didn't." She was humming while she packed. That was the part that stayed with me longest. Not the silk blouse she pulled from the very back of the closet, the deep burgundy one with the pearl buttons she had never once worn around me in 14 years of marriage. Not the second pair of heels she tossed in after a moment's hesitation, or the third pair she added with no hesitation at all. Not the perfume she spritzed onto her wrists twice, then a third time, right there in front of me like I was furniture. The humming was what lodged itself somewhere behind my sternum and refused to move. It was bright and careless and completely self-contained, the kind of sound a person makes when they have already left the room emotionally and the body is simply catching up to the decision. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom with my hands pushed deep into the pockets of my khakis, and I watched her fold that burgundy blouse with a precision she never applied to anything in our shared domestic life. The windows behind her were open, and the late afternoon light came in at a low angle and caught the dust motes drifting above the unmade bed on her side. Our bedroom. 14 years of it. The reading lamp with the cracked base she always meant to replace. The stack of unopened self-help books on her nightstand. The framed photo of us at the coast of Portugal, sun-bleached and laughing at something neither of us could remember anymore. All of it bathed in that golden light while she hummed and packed for a trip she had been looking forward to in ways she did not bother to conceal. "It is just a work trip with Marcus," she said, still not looking up from the suitcase. "You know, my work husband." She actually laughed when she said it, a short, dismissive little laugh that landed like a door closing softly in my face. Marcus Chen, Senior VP of Business Development, broad shoulders, easy smile, the kind of man who wore his confidence the way other men wore expensive suits, effortlessly and always. She had mentioned him in passing for about 2 years, then more frequently, then constantly, and the tone had shifted somewhere along the way from professional to something warmer and more private. I had noticed. I had always noticed. "You do not need to hover, James," she muttered, pressing down on the lid of the suitcase and working the zipper around its track. "It is business. Do not be so insecure." I nodded. Just once. Not because I agreed with her. Not because I lacked the words to push back. I nodded because I was already, in every way that mattered, completely and irrevocably gone. The decision had been made somewhere in the weeks prior, quietly and without ceremony, the way the most significant decisions of my life have always been made. She kissed the air beside my cheek like she was clocking out of a shift she had long since stopped caring about. Her perfume, the expensive one she kept in the drawer and not on the vanity, hung in the air for a moment after she passed me. Keys jingled. The suitcase wheels rolled across the hardwood floor of the hallway in that particular uneven rhythm I had heard 100 times before from business trips I never questioned. The front door opened, the front door shut, and I stood in the hallway, listening to the silence settle back into the house like sediment drifting down through still water. I gave it 30 seconds. Then I walked into my study. The study was the one room in our house that was entirely mine. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, no throw pillows, no decorative trays, just books and binders and the particular kind of organized quiet that serious thinking requires. I crouched down at the bottom shelf and pulled out a black leather binder, plain, zippered, the kind you would walk past 100 times without registering its existence, which was exactly the point. Unless you had spent the better part of 20 years writing corporate ethics frameworks, governance documents, and compliance architecture for some of the largest privately held firms in the country, you would never look at that binder twice. I set it on my desk and unzipped it slowly. Page 41. Clause 17. I had written this language myself years ago as part of the mutual conduct and fiduciary representation agreement that Lauren and I had both signed when we co-founded our consulting partnership before her career pivoted and mine deepened. She had signed it across from me at a conference table in a downtown office, wearing a gray blazer, smiling, drawing a tiny heart above the letter I on her signature line like she always did. She had not read it, not carefully, not page 41, not clause 17. I read it now once, quietly, in the late afternoon silence of my study. The language still held up, precise, cold, binding, exactly as I had written it. Then I picked up the phone and called the number at the top of my old firm's letterhead, a number I had not dialed in 4 years. It rang twice. "Activate 17, I said. Nothing more. No elaboration was required. The person on the other end knew my voice, knew the framework, and knew what the instruction meant. The call lasted 11 seconds. I hung up and sat with my hands flat on the desk for a moment, breathing steadily, feeling nothing in particular except clarity. By noon the following morning, I had contacted a discreet real estate agent who specialized in property transfers for divorcing executives. Her name was Patricia, and she worked from a small office above a dry cleaner on the east side of the city, and she had exactly zero interest in the emotional dimensions of any transaction she handled. We spoke in shorthand. She knew from a single phone call what I needed, what timeline I was working with, and what discretion the situation demanded. By 4 in the afternoon, the moving crew was scheduled. Professional, bonded, quiet. The kind of crew that fills a truck methodically and without commentary. I did not take the piano. Lauren had inherited it from her grandmother, and I had never once heard her play it, but she kept it tuned and polished and displayed like an artifact of a person she intended to become someday. I left it. I did not take the large, abstract painting we had bought together in Lisbon, the one that had taken 3 people to hang, and that Lauren had cried over when she found it at a small gallery near the waterfront. I left that too. I left the throw pillows and the decorative trays and the framed print in the hallway and everything else that belonged to the version of this life that was now concluded. I took the things that were mine, the binders, the books, the dark oak desk my father had left me. The coffee maker Lauren had always complained was too loud, my clothes, my files, my dog, a 10-year-old basset hound named Argus, who had always preferred my side of the bed anyway and seemed completely untroubled by the transition. The lake house had been mine before we married. A modest thing, cedar siding, a wide deck facing the water, 2 bedrooms, and a wood-burning stove. Lauren had visited it exactly 4 times and described it each time as charming in the tone people use for things they find insufficient. I had kept it quietly maintained through all 14 years. Fresh paint every few seasons, running water and functioning heat, and, as of the night, I arrived with Argus and 2 bags, clean linens on the bed. I sat on the deck with a mug of chamomile tea and watched the lake in the dark. The water was flat and black, and the tree line on the far shore was just a darker shape against a dark sky. Argus sat beside my chair with his chin on my knee. I was not angry. I was not even particularly sad, which I examined carefully because it seemed like I should be. What I found when I looked inward was not numbness, but something more like the feeling after a long illness finally breaks. The sharp release of something that had been slowly poisoning the air for a long time. I was already somewhere else entirely, somewhere Lauren did not know existed, and by the time she found it, she would have no map in. She had texted me from the airport. A single red heart emoji. No words. I looked at it for a moment and then set the phone face down on the deck railing and watched the water. 2 days into the trip, an old professional contact forwarded me a photograph pulled from a semi-private company social media feed. Lauren in a hotel hot tub, the mountain range visible through floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, steam rising in soft curls around her shoulders. Her arm was draped across Marcus Chen's shoulders with the comfortable ease of long familiarity. A half-finished mimosa in her free hand. The burgundy blouse, the one I had watched her pack with such care, was now unbuttoned and knotted loosely at the waist, worn over a swimsuit, one pearl button catching the light. She was laughing at something. She looked genuinely, radiantly happy in a way I could not recall seeing in years. There were no captions, no apparent concern about who might see it or what they might think. I stared at the photograph for a long time, not with the jagged pain of fresh betrayal, because the betrayal was not fresh. It had been happening for a while, and I had watched it happen with the particular helpless clarity of someone who can see the outcome clearly but cannot stop the mechanism. What I felt looking at that photograph was confirmation, clean and final and strangely quiet. I forwarded the image to one address only, a compliance contact at the external ethics firm that administered the governance framework I had spent my career building. Then I wiped the file from my device. Not because I needed it for any legal proceedings, though it could certainly serve that purpose. I needed it because it triggered subclause 17B of the Mutual Conduct Agreement. The language was specific. Visual confirmation of conduct deemed reputationally damaging to shared fiduciary partners constitutes an ethical breach, warranting immediate audit review. My language, my architecture, her signature. Sitting on page 6, right there beside the small heart she had drawn above the letter I on the day she signed it without reading it carefully enough. 4 hours after I sent that image, I received a silent automated notification from the external compliance contact. File received, timestamp locked, audit stream initiated. I closed the laptop, walked to the kitchen, and took out the trash. Argus watched me from his bed beside the stove with the mournful, philosophical expression he had perfected over a decade. Meanwhile, somewhere in a hotel in Colorado, Lauren was laughing in a hot tub beside a man who had spent years believing he was categorically untouchable. She had no idea the photograph existed in any formal context, even less idea what subclause 17B meant or that she had ever agreed to it. And absolutely no understanding that within 24 hours, Marcus Chen's access badge would not scan at any company entry point, his inbox would return a permanent error, and his boss, a careful and deeply cautious man named Richard Holt, would be on the phone with the compliance board using words like exposure, material breach, and potential malfeasance in a voice 2 registers lower than his normal speaking voice. She packed 3 pairs of heels for that trip. She should have packed an attorney. The flight home landed on a Thursday afternoon. I know the specific details of her return because Patricia, my real estate contact, had handled the property transfer with such efficiency that everything was completed and documented before Lauren's plane touched down. The locks had been changed at the lake house address listed as my forwarding address. The house we had shared, the house she returned to on that Thursday, was in her name exclusively now, transferred cleanly as part of the preliminary separation filing my attorney had initiated that Monday morning. That was the arrangement. She kept the house. I kept the partnership assets, the intellectual property, the consulting infrastructure, and the governance documents, including the binder. She would have turned the key. She would have pushed open the front door and heard the particular quality of silence that only exists in a house where every personal object belonging to another person has been removed. The piano sat in the center of the living room. The Lisbon painting hung in its place. Her throw pillows were arranged on the couch. But every trace of me, every book and binder and piece of dark oak furniture and loud coffee maker was gone. She would have walked from room to room. I imagine her footsteps in the hallway. I imagine her standing in the doorway of my study, now empty, bookshelves bare, desk shape still faintly visible in the carpet. I imagine the moment the understanding arrived. She called my phone 4 times. I did not answer. She sent 11 text messages in the space of 40 minutes. I read them all, once, and did not reply. The messages moved through several distinct phases. Confusion first, then irritation, then something that sounded like the beginning of fear. The last message was 3 words. James, please call. Then came the call that changed her understanding of the situation completely. Richard Holt called Lauren at 6:17 on that Thursday evening. I know the time because she mentioned it later, through her attorney, in a way that suggested it had carved itself into her memory with particular sharpness. Richard Holt, who had run the company's Northeast division for 11 years, and who Lauren had always described as unflappable, called her with his voice audibly shaking. Not with anger, with something closer to controlled panic. From what I was told later, through channels I will not detail here, the conversation was brief and devastating. Richard had spent the day in emergency sessions with the compliance board, the legal team, and 2 external advisors who had been called in specifically because the audit stream initiated by my file submission had uncovered not just the conduct documented in the photograph, but a pattern of expense account irregularities, a series of undisclosed conflicts of interest involving Marcus Chen's side consulting arrangement with a competing firm, and, most critically, a set of internal communications that placed Lauren in direct proximity to decisions she had influenced while in an undisclosed personal relationship with a senior stakeholder. The word malfeasance had been used. So had the word termination. So had the phrase independent legal counsel is strongly advised. Richard's exact words to her, as relayed to me later, were these: "He did not just divorce you. Emily, please tell me you did not know about Marcus's arrangement with Varden Group. Please tell me that." The name Emily was the detail that struck me most when I heard it later, because Richard only used Lauren's middle name when he was frightened. Everyone who knew him knew that, and Lauren knew it better than anyone. There is a folder. I should tell you about the folder because it matters to this story, and because it is the detail that Lauren has, I am told, returned to again and again in the months since. When she finished walking through the empty house that Thursday, she went to the master bedroom closet to hang up her coat. Taped to the inside of the closet door, at exactly eye level, was a small white envelope. Inside the envelope was a single index card. On the index card, in my handwriting, were 4 words: page 41, clause 17. That was all. No cruelty, no lengthy explanation, no catalog of grievances, just the reference, just the address of the decision she had made when she signed a document without reading it, beside a heart she had drawn above the letter I in a conference room on a Tuesday afternoon years ago, when she still believed that the details were someone else's concern. I have been at the lake house for 7 months now. Argus has claimed the armchair by the window as his permanent residence, and I have decided not to fight him on it. The deck needs a new board replaced near the far railing, and I have been meaning to do it for 3 weeks. Patricia handled the full separation of assets with her characteristic quiet efficiency, and the matter concluded without courtroom proceedings, which I had anticipated. Lauren retained counsel within 48 hours of Richard's phone call, which was the right decision, the first demonstrably right decision I had watched her make in some time. I do not think about the burgundy blouse anymore. I think about the humming, occasionally, in the early mornings, when the lake is very still, and Argus is still asleep, and the coffee maker is doing its loud, reliable work in the kitchen. I think about what it meant to be standing in that doorway and already be somewhere else. I think about the 14 years and the Lisbon painting and the cracked lamp base and the stack of self-help books she never opened. And then the coffee is ready, and the light comes up over the tree line on the far shore, and Argus comes padding in from the other room looking expectant and slightly indignant, and I pour my cup, and I step out onto the deck, and the water is right there, and I am exactly where I am supposed to be. She should have read the document. She had time.